I focused on how feminism was in 3 Asian countries and how the women were treated throughout history. The first country I will be talking about is Vietnam. We are going to look at how the roles of Vietnamese women and feminism in Vietnam have changed over time. Vietnamese women in the past lacked many of their legitimate rights, and their lives were limited by the rule of 3 subordinations, 4 virtues. At a young age, they were taught to follow their father and grow up to follow their husband after marriage, and then follow their sons when they become widows. They could hardly make decisions for themselves, and they barely had any rights to education. Moreover, women's value was judged throughout their domestic skills, beauty, speech, and moral conduct. If they lacked any of those values, they were deemed unworthy. Feminism back then in Vietnam were sparks of change led by bold, progressive women. The first change was dated around the late 18th century when poetess Ho Shin Hung mainly spoke against the suppression of womanhood, which gained great popularity despite its conflict with the ongoing Confucian patriarchal values. The major change came in 1986 when the renovation policy Doi Moi gave women a better stance in the labor force. Though there were issues regarding women's participation in leadership positions and the male domination in high-paid, non-manual jobs in the late 1900s, women accounted for around 52% of the total population and workforce. Feminism now in Vietnam has made great improvement and the status of women has improved greatly. They are now an integral part of the workforce, holding executive positions at a variety of sectors. Advance in society's consciousness on gender equality has also brought along a greater freedom for women in regards to their speech and choices. Girls, and especially millennials, aren't afraid of being single anymore, but instead devote their time and effort to work, studies, and their own hobbies. Men and women also share equal responsibilities in taking care of the family, which is a good sign for reducing women's burden on the household chores. Japan, like much of the rest of the world, has had its share of recent controversies involving women's issues. A young journalist was raped, and even though all evidence pointed at her assailant, police dropped the charges for no evident reason. A major medical university admitted to altering the grades of female applicants to decrease their enrollment. The country's sole female cabinet member was forced to change her outfit because what she wore to the cabinet's declaration ceremony was deemed inappropriate. Her skirt and jacket were just different colors. That's just 2018 alone. Feminism in Japan began with women's rights movements that date back to antiquity. The movement started to gain momentum after Western thinking was brought into Japan during the Meiji Restoration in 1868. Japanese feminism differs from Western feminism in the sense that less emphasis is on individual autonomy. Prior to the late 19th century, Japanese women were bound by the traditional patriarchal system where senior male members of the family maintained their authority in the household. After the reforms brought by Meiji Restoration, the status of women in Japanese society also went through a series of changes. Trafficking in women was restricted. Women were allowed to request divorces, and both boys and girls were required to receive elementary education. Further changes to the status of women came about in the aftermath of World War II. Women received the right to vote, and a section of the new constitution drafted in 1946 was dedicated to guarantee gender equality. In 1919, with the help of Ichi Kawafuse and Oku Mumo, Raicho Hiratsuka created the new women association Shin Fujin Kyokai. Their goal was to achieve rights of protection and inclusion through identifying a female class. In November 1919, Hiratsuka delivered a speech at the All-Kansei Federation of Women's Organizations toward the unification of women, stated that if women had rights, they would be able to be part of the state and help determine the future. Feminism has been on the rise in South Korea since 2015. The demand for women's rights has become an important topic of conversation in the 21st century. More and more young women are rallying together to fight against the deep-rooted, institutionalized views in their society, demanding their voice be heard via protest and through social media. Women's rights movements are now becoming vocal in their effort to effect the changes that didn't take place in the last century. Another key case which raised awareness of women's rights was the stabbing of a young woman in the Gangnam district in 2016. The perpetrator waited in the public toilets, specifically looking to harm women, as he didn't like them. The case sparked the #Survived social media movement, started by women who shared stories of the violence they had been subjected to, and how unsafe they felt in South Korea simply by being a woman. South Korean feminism didn't have a voice until 5 years ago, when feminist communities started appearing online, bringing attention to the movement. Radical groups like Megala were at the forefront. Founded in 2015, Megla embodies a new wave of feminism, one that focuses on promoting gender equality while also mocking misogyny and sexism through satire online. Their site strictly operates on an anonymous basis, with every user being under the same nickname in order to protect the user's anonymity. The radical group is known for mirroring sexist comments made by men online as a way of fighting back against misogynistic views. They have also been successfully behind many feminist campaigns, such as the shutting down of the porn site Soranet, which had non-consensual videos of women that were taken secretly through hidden cameras, and the petition against the controversial Maxim magazine cover, which depicted a tied-up female victim in the boot of a car while looking up at her assailant, a man. Considering South Korea's rapid development in technology, the same cannot be said about the cultural views in their society. Traditionally, women have been seen as childbearers and housewives, and the man as the breadwinners. Due to this, the common representation of women has been portrayed as submissive and men as dominant. This mindset is still common in today's society, which is why society's view of feminism can be very skewed and unsure. Today, the word feminist might carry a negative stigma in South Korea, but by continuing to raise awareness of women's rights and building on the work that has already been done by feminist groups, it will only likely get better.